Hello and welcome to our webinar. We do have a few minutes until 3 o'clock, so we're going to give everyone a few minutes just to sign in, but there are some housekeeping items here while you wait. All of your microphones are muted and the cameras are turned off. Questions can be asked using the Q&A function, and the webinar monitors may be able to answer your questions during today's presentation, but they may also wait and send you an email reply as well. Following the webinar, participants will receive a PDF of the presentation and a link to the recording. We do not offer any CEUs for this webinar series. And if you are looking for recordings from past webinars, you can check out our Person-Centered Planning Quality Improvement Project at the arcmichigan.org. Thank you for attending, and we will begin soon. Okay, once again, I welcome you all here today. We have turned on the transcript or the closed captioning, and your microphones are shut off, but you may use the Q&A function, and we will do our best to answer any questions that you have, or you may get a follow-up email for those questions. So I would like to introduce Tracy Vincent and Jan Latman, and they're going to be talking about charting the life course today.
All right, well, thank you so much, Heather. My name is Tracy Vincent, and I am with the Michigan Developmental Disabilities Council, and I am also part of our Michigan Community of Practice for Supporting Families State team. And then I'll go ahead and have Jan introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Jan Lampman, and I am with Community Drive. I'm also a member of the state team and have been working with the DD Council on this topic of supporting families and using this model, charting the life course.
Right. So today, Jan and I are going to be presenting on improving lives through services and supports, using the Charting the Life course, using the lens of Charting the Life course. And so if Heather, if we could have the presentation come up, that would be great.
All right.
That's okay, no problem.
Other one.
I'm getting to feel nervous.
There we go. All right, so we can go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so today we are going to provide a very brief overview of Charting the Life Course framework with a specific focus on one of the principles and tools called the trajectory. So we're going to be really explaining what the trajectory is and sharing several examples on the variety of ways that it can be used in helping people plan for their good life. And then we're also going to be sharing an opportunity for CMHSPs to apply for through the person-centered practice learning community. And then we're going to end with some additional resources for you. So next slide. All right. So I do like to start off by talking about, what is Charting the Life Course? And so the Life Course is a framework that was created for all people and families of all abilities and all ages to really develop a vision for a good life. For them to be able to share their ideas, their hopes, their dreams, and their fears. It's also a way to explore all of the different possibilities for individuals and families, really getting creative and thinking outside of the box. It's a way to help work through, having those difficult conversations with individuals and families. It's also a framework that encourages setting higher expectations for people and then really supporting people so that they can reach their full potential. It's a way to help navigate the future, to problem solve, plan, and communicate. And it's also a way to explore a wide variety of supports. Next slide. So the core belief of Charting the Life Course is that all people and their families have the right to live, love, work, play, and pursue their aspirations in the community. And so this is not a separate framework for people with disabilities, that this is really a framework for everyone. The all is included in this core belief. And so when I had said the all, Charting the Life Course, we do focus on the all, that all people are considered in our vision, values, policies, and practices, regardless of age, their ability, their diagnosis, or whatever life stage that they are in. Next slide. And so to expand on that just a little bit further, on a national level, only about 25% of people access formal or paid supports within the DD system. So what about the rest? What about the other 75%? How do they also have good lives? How do the systems of support consider all people and families when making policies and improving practices? So again, we really look at the all, whether you're receiving services or not. And so we know that services and supports continue to evolve. And so if we look at the circle on the left, as an individual, we all have family and friends, and we're part of a community. So we all exist within the context of our family and our community. And to think about where we're headed with this framework, the idea is really to build upon those three circles. So if you look at the circle in the middle, you'll see that green circle, services, that represent services. And sometimes with the best intentions, those services are wrapped so tightly around the person that it really cuts them off from their family and friends and community. So even though we've come a long way in the way that we offer supports and services, we still need to challenge ourselves. Are the supports and services that we're offering, are they a barrier to providing connections to family and community? Or are the supports being offered really creating a meaningful life that people want to have? So if we look at the circle on the right-hand side, this is the visual image that we use when we're thinking about where we are headed with this framework, where the person exists within the context of their family and friends and community, but they have those integrated supports and services, only where and when needed. Next slide. So another principle of the framework is that all individuals exist within the context of family. So we're not only looking at the individual, we also recognize that the person, they have other people in their family unit. Those who are really their close circle of supporters. We know that there's different types of family memberships. We have traditional families with mom and dad, but we also have non-traditional families. Maybe the person's living with maybe grandparents or aunts and uncles. But the point here is that family is defined by the individual. So it could really be support staff or other relatives or friends or peers, and just really understanding that we all have those reciprocal roles within our family system. And so we have to just keep in mind that those roles will adjust as the individual members of the family system change and age. Um, so the entire family needs support, just to make sure that that everyone in that family unit, has an opportunity to be successful. And then another key principle of the framework are the life domains. And the life domains are the different aspects and experiences of life that we all consider as we age and grow. So the life course has identified 6 domain areas that includes daily life and employment, community living, safety and security, healthy living, social and spirituality, and advocacy and engagement. Oftentimes, the service system tends to only focus on safety and security, keeping that person safe. And while that is very important, and it is a life domain that's been identified, we really tend to leave out the other important conversations about where that person wants to live, how they're going to get around, and just being an active and responsible citizen in their community. So as people, we all lead whole lives made up of those specific, connected, and integrated life domains that are important to a good quality of life. And then another principle of the life course are the 3 buckets of need. And these are the strategies for supporting individuals and families that include discovery and navigation. So that's just having information and tools that we need to navigate life and that we need to make an informed decision. The second bucket is connecting and networking, and that is making connections with peers and resources, to help you navigate. So maybe it's a parent-to-parent support, a self-advocacy group, peer-to-peer, peer mentors. And then the last bucket is the goods and services. And so those are the day-to-day tangible items that we buy or use from public and private organizations in our community. And so these 3 buckets of need is something that, we all need and that we all can have access to, whether we're receiving formal services or not. Next slide. And so by utilizing this framework, the individual will achieve self-determination, interdependence, productivity, integration, and inclusion in all facets of community life. and that families will be supported in ways that maximize their capacity, their strengths, and their unique abilities to best nurture, love, and support the individual to achieve their goal. So this framework, this approach really focuses on both person-centered and family-centered supports, because again, the framework recognizes that the individual exists within a family system and that family is defined by that individual. All
So,
right, so, yeah.
oh, go ahead.
Nope, I was going to turn it over to you, Jan.
Okay. Alrighty. So I'm gonna hop in here and let's just talk a bit about the trajectory and what we're really, what we really mean by that. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So when we talk about that idea of trajectory, we're really talking about the path we take to get someplace, right? And so the first sort of step in thinking about what we want to do today is to think about what is our vision for a good life, right? What are our dreams? What is it we want to do? What is the North Star, if you will, right? I think that we all sort of have that kind of thinking in our heads. Some people do it really formally and can tell you right now what their big dreams are and what they're doing to get to that big dream. And then some people it's a little less formal, but in this framework, really stopping and taking some good time to think about what your vision for a good life is, what you want your North Star to be, is really, really important. If you want to go to the next slide, so what does that mean, right? It means we're talking about, like, what do you want your life to look like? What are your goals, your dreams for the future? I can remember when we were first engaging in person-centered planning, in Michigan in the 1990s. Yeah, I guess it was the 1990s. We did a lot of talk about dreaming, right? But now that person-centered planning is a part of the mental health code and it's in the system, we have like individual plans of service we have to write. We sometimes focus more on the immediate goals, the goals for the next 12 months, the goals for right now, the objectives, those measurable things we're going to work on, right? Without having talked about the big dream. And so it's like we're doing something out of context. And so this tool, the trajectory, really gives us some time and space to think about, what does this person want their life to look like? Next slide, please. We also talk about what we don't want, right? When you're creating a map, it's good to know what roads you want to take, but it's also good to know what roads you don't want to take. On my nav system, I can say that I want to avoid highways or I want to avoid toll roads, right? And then I'll get a different path or a different, route to take because I don't want to go on the toll road. I would like to push the button for never having to go through tunnels, but in order to get to some places on the East Coast, that's impossible. And so I can't do that. I have to fly. So you want to talk about what you don't want also. What do you want to avoid? What do you want to make sure doesn't happen? I know that lots of people that I talk to about this, the big thing they'll talk about is that they don't want to be lonely. The big thing moms and dads will sometimes talk about is now that we've sort of figured it out a little bit, parents will often talk about loneliness as well. But a lot of times parents used to talk about when we were first helping people move into their own homes, parents, that their worry would be they don't want their son or daughter to like be in an unsafe situation, right? But again, spending some time really talking about that, not just, that you don't want your neighbor to bug you today, but like, what are the things that you really worry about for your future, right? So we start with those two places. Go ahead, next slide. Right, and so we start with that vision of a good life. It's so important to have a North Star. I mean, if you think about it, I bet every one of you can name kind of what your North Star is, right? And that changes over time, by the way, right? But the things that are pretty universal, right, are friends, family, enough money, a job that you like, home, faith, vacations, health, choice, freedom, right? If you think about those words that are pretty universal, those are sort of universal human desires, right? And they fit in the categories that Tracy was talking about earlier too, right? The 6 domains. And so really thinking about your vision for all of those aspects of your life is important in this trajectory. Next slide, please. And again, it's just as important to talk about those things that you don't want to see and that you don't want to have happen and the road you don't want to go on. So for example, I have a son that I adopted out of the foster care system. And one of the things that he never, ever, ever wants to have happen to him again is to have to talk to someone from the child or adult welfare system, right? So he never wants to see a CPS worker again as long as he lives. And he never wants to see, you know, a foster care worker again as long as he lives. And so that's really important to him, that he not wind up ever in a position where he's got people from that organization coming to see him because of the childhood trauma, right? None of those people did anything bad to him. They were all wonderful, caring professionals, but for him, it's traumatizing. So it's on my son's vision of what he doesn't ever want to have happen to him again. Next slide, please. So then you start thinking about, right, how do I move towards this vision of a good life? So when we're helping people plan, and we're using whatever tools we're using, when we're helping people plan, we really want to be helping them think about what are the things I can do today, right, that move me towards the place I want to go, or that keep me from moving towards the place I don't want to go, right? So that's what we're talking about when we talk about the trajectory. Here I am today, and I want to go here. So what do I need to do to get there? Next slide, please. So one of the things that is really helpful is when you've created your vision, where you want to be, where you don't want to be, then you can sort of think about, okay, so what are some things that have happened to me in the past that maybe could help me get where I want to go, or maybe were the things that got me where I don't want to go, or could cause me to go to the place I don't want to go, right? And so you can reflect on some of those experiences in the past. That can help inform, right, what we do next. What we did yesterday can help us decide what we're going to do today and tomorrow. Next slide, please. So again, we have this trajectory. We have this great life that we want to lead. And, you know, parents will start dreaming for their children before they're born, right? And so when you're talking with families with young kids, you know, they've got maybe a small child or a baby even. And so it might be really hard for them to imagine a future, right, of them as a grown-up. But you can help them think about, you know, here's the path. We know you want some kind of good life. So what's the path that you want to take, right? We know eventually you're going to end up in school. We know that you might need some supports from, you know, eligibility-based services like Social Security. What would happen if you have guardianship when your child turns 18? You know, all the things that help you move towards your good life. And then what are the things that you don't want for your child, right? And so this little trajectory sort of shows, you know, the trajectory of a child who grows up into having a good life. And, you know, they went to school, they got some eligibility-based supports. Their family looked at guardianship. They had some things related to, you know, the services and how to access them and how to get them. The things that could have gone off kilter for them anywhere along that trajectory, though, were the things they were really worried about, right? So what if when they were in school, they only were in special programs and they only ended up after school depending on public funding? What if they ended up in some kind of segregated classroom and then maybe they became cut off and separated from the community at large as they grew up, right? That labeled world, the place they don't want to be. So how can you stay on that positive trajectory to have a great life, even though you might need special education services, and even though you might need to go on SSI, and even though you might need some kind of support to help with decision-making when you grow up, right? And so when you're working with the trajectory, you can really think about, okay, so here are all the stages in life and the things that could happen. How can we keep them moving in a positive direction as opposed to that place where you don't want to go, right? Because the same thing, an education, going to school can either, right, cause you to move it toward your desired life, or if things go south, it can actually cause you to end up in the place you don't want to be, right? And so it's really important at each stage of life to really be thinking about the supports that help you move upward. Next slide, please. There we go. And so here's just another sort of look at the trajectory across the life stages, right? So when you think about a trajectory, you start out as a baby, then you're in school, then you're starting to get ready to leave school, then you do leave school and you live your adult life, and then your parents turn 65, and that's a big moment often for people with disabilities. Your main caregiver hits retirement age, and then maybe your parents are gone and now you're in retirement age, right? And so when we use the trajectory, we can really look at it across life stages, right? And we can help people plan for staying on the path they want to be on as each of these different life stages hits, right? Next slide, please. And so, here's an example of, let's see, this must be the middle school. I'm going to say middle school time frame, right? So what are the things that are going on, right? You're learning to say no. You're learning that you should sometimes say no, and it's okay to say no. You're having birthday parties with friends, and you're experiencing dating and heartaches every week. I have a 15-year-old in my house right now, and it's, oh my gosh, the drama. You're doing chores and allowance, right? You're making mistakes. One of the things that I think that we can do as both parents, but also as systems, is we can be so focused on keeping people safe that then we prevent them from making mistakes or prevent them from having those negative experiences that help us really grow and learn, right? And so when it's the time that kids are making mistakes, we should be figuring out how kids with disabilities are also going to have those same opportunities. Summer jobs, babysitting, hanging out with friends, maybe playing sports or getting involved with clubs. Those are the things that we know happen in middle school, right? And so as we're in elementary school, right, we're focusing on doing the things that will help our child have friends when they hit middle school, be able to get invited to those birthday parties. We've been teaching our children about, body autonomy and being able to say no, and when to say no and when to do what you're supposed to do, all of those things. And so the trajectory can just sort of help us stay focused on what's that next stage and what is it we want to be preparing our child for so that they can continue to go on the path they want to go on. Next slide. So I want to talk about that idea of dignity of risk and mistakes. I can tell you that, there's this little phrase here, never be defined by your past. It was just a lesson, not a life sentence, right? How many people that you support, if you're a professional or a family member, right? How many people that you love who happen to have a disability continue to be defined by something that some behavioral situation that occurred when they were a kid, right? The example that I hear a lot is, somebody, a 5-year-old boy with autism got curious and was playing with matches and started a small fire in the backyard, right? It got put in his chart, his records that he starts fires, and we have to prevent him from starting fires. And so now he's a 35-year-old man living in the community, and it's still in his chart, and there's still all this activity around helping to prevent him from having access to matches, when that might have just been something he tried out when he was 5, because sometimes little kids do that, right? Actually, I think middle school is also the fire starter phase in most young people. And so we want to make sure that people are able to experience those things like everybody else in the community, right? That might be a mistake, that might have a negative consequence, so that they can learn from that consequence, right? And so being able to, go on dates, or being able to go hang out with friends, being able to ride your bike, all the things that could cause you to, have a sadness or a heartache or fall down and skin your knee, right, are things that we need to make sure that we're giving people the opportunity to engage in. Okay, so applying the principle of trajectory and life experiences. Let's talk a little bit more about, so what can we do with the trajectory? Well, it helps us problem solve, right? If we know we want to get someplace, we've got our North Star we're looking at. using that trajectory tool can help us think about how can we, okay, so here we are, we're a little bit stuck. What do we need to do to get unstuck? It feels like we're going down to this place where we don't want to be. So it's just a way to frame the conversation around problem solving, right? And working toward goals. The trajectory also can help you to plan day-to-day activities. You can do a trajectory with the North Star, but then you can pull back and do a trajectory that's related to getting a job that you're trying to get, right? Or finding a new place to live. And so it can help you to plan those day-to-day activities that, again, keep you moving in that upward momentum. It can also help you be clear about what you do and don't want. I think sometimes, again, we maybe don't always spend as much time as we should, even with ourselves, right? Thinking about where we want to be and where we don't want to be. And this tool, this trajectory, this model helps us to get some clarity about that question of what we want and what we don't want. And then the other thing that the trajectory does, when you do the part where you look at your past experiences and think about, did that past experience help me move towards where I want to be or away from where I want to be? It helps us to just think about what past experiences were helpful and which were barriers, so that we can, again, plan and decide, well, that didn't work out so great last time. I'm going to try something different next time. And then another really cool use of the trajectory, not just like in the life of a person or a family, but you can actually use the trajectory for strategic planning and implementation within organizations or systems or family systems, right? And so it doesn't have to be for an individual. It doesn't have to be just for person-centered planning, but it can be for family planning or for community organization planning or for, systems planning. And so the trajectory is a great tool that can just be used to help people think about the questions that you want to answer and the actions you want to take to get from point A to point B. Next slide, please. So here is an example of one, right? And this is Taylor. And this is a family. This is Taylor's family speaking, because we a lot of times will do a trajectory that is like the family perspective and then the individual perspective. And so this is Taylor's family, and they want her to be happy with her life and have purpose, right? They want her to continue going to the farmer's house because it's so important to her. Don't know what the farmer's house is, but there you go. And they want Taylor to feel independent, to know that her family's still there when she needs them, but that she is, her own autonomous person. What they don't want is strangers helping her with her personal care. They don't want to be her chauffeur for the rest of her life. They want her to continue to be, they don't want her to continue to be dependent on them. And they don't want her to continue to binge eat when she's all by herself and lonely, right? And so after they came up with their vision, they then talked about, right, some of the possible solutions. So they talked about how to get help with personal hygiene. And they talked about maybe helping her to learn how to get around on her own using public transportation. They talked about her building friendships and connections to people that work within various organizations. Then they talked about some of the skills that she could learn to improve her independence, right? And what are some of the things that would be important for her that she would enjoy learning and that she would be able to learn. And then they talked about some of the family roles and responsibilities, right? What are they going to do to help her get towards her vision? And so some of the ideas were, setting up a planner for her medication, setting up those MedMinder planner things, taking her to her doctor's appointments, continuing to help her pay her bills, check in on her to make sure things are going well, make sure she gets to family functions, and requesting some paid services and supports. And so this was what the family saw as their vision. And then this part of the trajectory sort of shows some of the actions that they intend to take to get towards that vision. So that's how they used it, T's family. Next slide. So then you could also just pick one piece of a life domain, right? Or an immediate goal, a short-term goal, like this one for employment planning, right? And so this vision, this person's vision You know, they talk about their long-term employment goals, right? He'd like to find a job that he's good at and enjoys that would be long-term employment, right? He likes custodial work, so maybe that would be a good thing. He wants to make sure that he's, you know, valued in the job. He wants to have full-time employment, and he wants some benefits. He wants to be independent. You know, he's got all these things that he wants in his long-term goal, right? And so then they started looking at, you know, what are the things that he brings to the table that will help him get to where he wants to go? And then what are some things that he doesn't want, right? And then they did, as you can see, they created a little, you know, this is the history, right? Before 96, sheltered workshop, 96 to 01. What was the next thing? 2010. What was the next thing? 2014, 2015. So they kind of show the different types of work that he was doing in his history and how each of those jobs got him closer to the ultimate goal, right? And then they continue to work towards that goal of full-time employment. And this just helped him to think about, help this team to think about what he brings to the table, clarify what he doesn't want, and look at where he's been and where he's going, and is where he's been and where he's going getting him towards that long-term goal. So this is a trajectory format that you can use for any kind of planning meeting, right? And you start over here on the right-hand side. I'm using my cursor and I know you guys can't see it, so I'm sorry. So you start over on the side with a thank you, Heather, with a vision for a good life and what you don't want, right? You start there, then you go back and you look at your past experiences, right? And then you can start to think about, okay, so here's my past, here's what's helped, what hasn't helped. I've got my vision, I've got what I don't want. So then in the middle section, you can really start to talk about, okay, so what are the current things that I'm doing right now, or the things I could be doing in the near future that are going to support my vision, right? That are going to get me to my vision. And then that bottom half is things that really are going to push me towards things I don't want. Is there something I'm doing right now that is not helping and it's really pushing me down the path I don't want to go down? Or are there things that I know if I did that thing, it would push me down where I don't want to go? So let's list those out. And then once you've completed this document, when you're moving forward with planning, you really stay focused on the top half of the sheet, right? Let's figure out what are the things you're doing now that work, the things that you can be doing in the future that work, and let's make sure that you've got the support you need to do those things. Next slide. This is one that they did that a family did to talk about respite, right? They wanted to have, you know, just some really good quality respite providers. And so they talked about, you know, what does it look like? What does good respite look like? What would they don't want to have happen with respite, right? And once they've been able to really take some time to spell out what they would like respite support to look like for their family, right? And what they don't want it to look like, then they were able to back up and think about what's happened in the past that's helped or not helped. And then where do they go in the future? What are the things that they need to look for? What can they look for in a respite provider that would get them to where they want to be with respite? And so they got real specific in that one. You know, like they want somebody who's going to, let's see, watching wrestling or listening to music, right? That's what that young man would like his respite provider to do with him. And so he got real specific. This is the stuff I want to do when respite's happening, right? Mom says, this is the stuff I want to have happen when respite's happening. And you get real specific and detailed. And so then it helps you to find the right fit, right? Let's go to that next slide. Another example here is Elizabeth was needing a new place to live, right? So she talked about what she'd like that to look like, what she didn't want it to look like, where she's lived and what it's looked like in the past that has been good, some things that have been not so good, and then what are the things, right, that are happening now or that can happen in the future to help me find that next good place to live, or that things that would happen or that are happening that are they're getting in the way. We got to stop doing it. Okay, next one. And then this is one that is a trajectory for life experiences and decision making, right? And so again, thinking about what are the things, so decision making is a skill that you learn, right? So what are the things that I want to be able to make decisions about, right? What are the things I don't want? I don't want a substitute decision maker. I don't want to be unemployed. I don't want to be dependent on others, right? And so then what are the things that we can be doing from the time the child is small until they are grown that can help move them towards the place they want to be, right? What are the skills you start imparting on the little kids that eventually help them with employment, with self-determination, with being able to make decisions, right? With being safe. I like to always say, this is my little sidebar, but I like to always say that, you know, the best way to, so I used to work for a chapter of the ARC, and parents would come to me and say, oh, we need to get guardianship for our child. She's about to turn 18. And one of the reasons they would want that guardianship is because they want their child safe from abuse. And so I would say, well, you know, just having that piece of paper isn't going to keep your child safe from abuse unless you're planning to be with your child 24/7. Maybe handcuff yourself to them. That would help. But instead, what helps people be safe from abuse, right, are learning skills. And so I think that using this trajectory and thinking about things you can be teaching your kid all along the lifespan, right, to get to this place is really a helpful tool. Next slide. And then this is one that they did a trajectory because they wanted to hire some self-directed staff, right? And so the vision was that he wants to live in his own apartment, and then he had the things that he would like some assistance with in order to be able to live in his own apartment. And then we talked about the things he brings to the table, right? And then this is you, direct support staff, potential direct support staff. This is how you could help him to be able to have a good life. So this is kind of cool because they use the trajectory as a way to share with others who might become direct support staff or might know someone who could become a direct support staff, right? So he shared his vision and said, okay, here's my vision. I need some help to do that. Here's what I bring to the table, and here's what I need some help with. And they presented that to potential staff. And so it was just a really good way, again, to think about how to frame the vision and what you need, right? Next slide. Okay, and I'm going to turn it back over to Tracy.
All right. All right, so we want to just share with you some other related tools and materials. So next slide. So if you want to learn more about the life course, you can visit lifecoursetools.com. There are several resources available for you, and all of the tools are available to download. Everything is free to download. And so there's lots of different types of planning guides and planning guides around each of the life domain areas. And then there's family planning tools and planning tools for the individual, because, you know, sometimes we know parents' vision can be different from the person's vision. And so this is a really great way for them to be able to, you know, complete their planning guide and then come together and hopefully compromise. So I really encourage you to check out all of those tools that are available. And then next slide. So next month, we are going to be focusing specifically on 2 more of the life course principles, and that is the 3 buckets of support that I very briefly touched on today. So we're going to be taking a deeper dive into those 3 strategies, and then we're also going to be focusing on the integrated support star. So my colleague Tedra Jackson, who is also a life course ambassador and a member of our Michigan Community of Practice for Supporting Families State Team member, will be sharing that information with you. And then, so lastly, we really want to share an exciting opportunity with you, and that is the person-centered practice learning community. Our Michigan Community of Practice for Supporting Families, our state team, in partnership with the Community Mental Health Association of Michigan, we are forming a collaborative learning community to provide CMHSPs an opportunity to work collaboratively, I'm having a hard time talking today, to transform and enhance person-centered planning practices and policies. And we are also hoping that participants will also inform recommendations to the department for statewide adoption. So members of the learning community will receive training, technical assistance, and the opportunity to connect with others through a 2-year process designed to support ongoing transformation at the organizational and the statewide level. So with this 2-year process, in year 1, teams will explore how to apply the life course principles to improve person-centered practices, and will also implement the framework and principles to advance person-centered practices within their organization, including but not limited to changes in policy, procedures, and other systems change related to person-centered practice. Next slide. So with our PCP learning community, we will have a maximum of 4 teams who will be selected to participate. Like I had mentioned, it is a 2-year commitment, which will begin January of 2023. And so in year 1, we're going to spend a lot of time, probably in the first year, learning the life course framework and principles and implementing those principles with persons served and really helping those teams develop and refine their goals. And then year 2 will be a little bit less intensive meeting schedule with a focus to continue to implement the framework while making changes necessary to policy, procedures, and practices within the organization. Each team will include up to 5 staff members. I do want to mention that there's no cost to participate. And we do have an application process. And so applications will be due November 30th. And we are also going to be hosting an informational call to really go over all of the details of the learning community. And then we're going to have our state team available to answer any questions that you might have. And so that's going to happen on November 10th at 10:30. So we will be sending all of this information out tomorrow, and we will be sending it through, the ARC so that whoever is on their list will also receive that information as well. And so with that, we would like to open it up for any questions that you might have, unless Jan, you had anything else to include around the learning community.
No, I think you covered it really well. Thank you.
Tracy and Jan, I don't see any questions in the Q&A right now, but we will wait a few minutes and see if anyone has any questions to type in that Q&A at the bottom of the screen. Also, I just want to remind everyone, if you registered for today's webinar, you will be automatically registered for next month's webinar. Okay, and I'm still not seeing anything in the Q&A, but we can wait just a few more minutes to give people some time to think or to type in. That would be great. And just a reminder to everyone, we will be sending out the link to the recording of this webinar, as well as a PDF of the slideshow that or the presentation. And those will also be available on our website. And the link to that was in the first slide, so you will get that. And if there's any, previous webinars that you wanted to go back and look at, you can do that as well. There's also a link on that web page for our help desk for any questions regarding person-centered planning or self-determination. You can submit that to the help desk, and I collaborate with different colleagues to get the best answers that we can for people who are doing self-determination or person-centered planning in general. All right, I'm still not seeing anything in the Q&A. We do have a few more minutes. But if we don't see anything here in the next few minutes, we can end a little early. All right, I'm not seeing any questions coming up. Tracy or Jan, do you have anything else you want to add, or are you guys okay with ending a few minutes early?
I'm good with ending a few minutes early. I thank everyone for attending today, and hopefully you found this information helpful. And next month we'll get into a couple of really cool principles that I think people will really like.
All right, so Tracy and Jan, I want to thank you guys again for your time today and the great information that you presented. And we will get that emailed out to everyone in our follow-up email. So about 10 extra minutes today. So I would tell you to enjoy the weather, but it's kind of gloomy where I am. So maybe just enjoy a couple minutes to yourself, a little bit of self-care. All right, thank you. And I look forward to seeing you all again next month.
Bye. Thanks, Heather.
Bye, thank
Bye-bye.
you.